This is Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to talk about mileage and why mileage doesn't scare me when I buy used cars. And in fact, why I specifically seek out sports cars and special cars that have miles on them. It is the opposite of how most people think. It is a little bit controversial, but it's what I do, and today I'm going to explain why. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. Okay, so mileage and why mileage doesn't scare me when it comes to buying my cars and why I seek out cars with miles. So to give you a little background, obviously the cars that sell for the most money, especially when it comes to special expensive sports cars like the Ford GT, the Countach, the Carrera GT, which are above me, obviously the cars that bring the most money have low miles, 0 mile, 24 mile cars. Those examples, they're pristine. They sell for the most money at auctions, at private collections, whatever. Those are the cars that have the most desired collector interest and they bring the most money. And they're relatively easy to find because there's always a group of these cars that are sort of collected purely for investment purposes. And when someone dies or they're ready to realize their investment, they sell those cars. And so it's easy to get one of those cars and you end up paying a significant premium for one of those cars. Meanwhile, my strategy when I have bought these 3 special cars that I have and various others is that I have specifically looked for cars that have miles, which is totally the opposite of what you would expect the strategy to be, but it is indeed my strategy. And as an example, when I bought my Ford GT, it had about 31,000 miles on it, which for a Ford GT puts it in probably the top 5%. Really uncommon to get to that level. The Carrera GT had 10,000 miles on it when I bought it, which is also very unusual for one of those in the United States. In Europe, that would put it sort of in the middle of cars. A lot more Carrera GTs are driven a lot more in Europe, but in the States, 10,000 miles is a very high mileage Carrera GT. And the Countach, I don't even remember, but apparently it had 37,000 miles on it when I bought it, and I've driven it since. So most people would decry all 3 of these cars as high mileage. And in fact, most people would say that as a result, they are not good collectible investment cars. That's really not their purpose, and you're kind of miled up these cars. People would refer to all 3 of these cars as high mileage and say that I've miled them up. To that end, why? Why do I look for those cars, given that the market has so much more interest in lower mileage stuff? Probably the biggest reason, the number one reason, is that I want to use the cars. I want to drive the cars myself. And something that I learned from a very young age in the car world, buying, selling, I worked at dealers, I worked at automakers, obviously now on Cars and Bids. I've always been around kind of the car, market. And something that I've learned is that a car that already has miles on it, each additional mile is not as much of a penalty as all of the previous miles. So the Ford GT I bought with 31,000 miles, and now it has 45,000. Those miles, I'm not going to say they were free. If the car still had 31,000, it would be worth more, but they were very cheap compared to taking a car with 2,000 miles and driving it, putting the same 14,000 miles on it being at 16, you would really erode some of the value. Some of what you're paying for when you buy a super low mile car is you're paying for that special mileage premium of this untouched, pristine car, and I want a car that I can drive. And so by buying a car that has miles, it is already worth less than the really special cars, and so additional miles do not add significantly more to the value. I do not view myself as a car collector. Occasionally people say to me, hey, nice collection. I got 3 cool cars. I don't consider it a collection, and more importantly, when I think about a collection, I think about something that sort of sits and you look at it and you dust it off periodically, and it's something you show your friends, but it's never something that you use. Like a collection collection of coins or stamps or whatever. It sits under glass and it just is there for viewing. The cars, to me, are not a collection. I drive the cars all the time. I just drove the Ford GT this morning. I'm driving the Countach as soon as I finish this video. Like, these are not collectibles to me. And so I want vehicles that I can use, and buying cars that already have miles means that they are cheaper to buy and that each additional mile is cheaper to add. But there is more to it than just that. Another big component of buying a car with super low miles is that it is pristine. A super low mile car is often originally still in the plastic, original tires, original whatever. Everything is how it left the factory. And there is something very special about seeing a car like that, especially as a guy who has 3 kind of used supercars. When I get around one of these cars that is completely unused, it is cool to poke around and see what it looked like, how pristine it could be. However, when you buy a car with some miles, you already have some flaws. This Ford GT, the previous owner at one point backed into something in the rear diffuser and took a little chunk out of it. There were some scratches on the gear knob when I bought the car. The Countach, various panels had been painted at different times, and so it wasn't like all perfect, one perfect paint color. The Carrera GT has a little dent inside the door jamb from there's a small storage compartment in the door. At one point it was accidentally opened and closed. The door was closed with it open and it dented the door jamb. These little things, little leather imperfections in the Carrera GT, these little things happen to a car with miles. And if you buy a car with 0 miles, it's super pristine, and then you want to use it, as I do, you feel pretty guilty about every time you have an incident or damage the car. I drive the Ford GT totally guilt-free. It has a couple of wear things, like that. It is a car that is a little bit worn, and I'm cool with that, because that is the use case that I want. And I think I would feel a lot more guilty about using a 0 mile car. I think, this is not a high and mighty video, by the way. I think there is absolutely a place in the world for 0 mile cars. In collections, in museums, for people to observe what those cars looked like when they came out of the factory. There is something very special about that. But as a person who wants to use the car, the last thing you want to do is buy a 0 mile car and not only pay a premium and put miles on it, but also damage a 0 mile car. You want to get a car that's already been used a little bit that you feel less guilty about damaging. And of course, there is one other big factor of buying cars with miles on them. And this is a factor that I think plays more into other people's minds than it does into mine, but I think it really is a legitimate situation. And that is that cars that have been driven have been used, and so they are more likely to be more reliable in the future. I do not put an enormous amount of trust in cars that have been just sitting for a long time. And actually, when I bought the Carrera GT, the previous couple of owners had been afraid to take it over 10,000 miles. It was at 9950 or something. And so it had been sitting. And for the last few years before I bought it, it only had done like 150 miles. And as a result of that, when I started using it frequently again, it started to have issues. And it took me about a year. I've had it for 3 years now. It took me about a year to catch up on some of that stuff. It wasn't what I would call deferred maintenance. It was just stuff that the car is sitting, it's not being exercised, it's not being used. It's stuff that you would discover in normal use of the car, but when it just sits, you don't find out about it, and then you drive the car and suddenly you see, okay, there are some issues here. The headlight was out and there were a few seals and stuff that needed a little work. And so to me, buying a car with some miles on it shows regular use, regular ownership. Obviously that goes with regular servicing, and you make sure that the car has been used and that use is not a foreign concept to the car. A vehicle, the Ford GT is 20 years old, the Carrera GT is 20 years old, the Countach is 40 years old. A car like that just sits, metal that doesn't turn, oil that doesn't get in, lubricate parts of the engine, a car like that sits for 3, 4, 5 years, which is not uncommon for really low mile cars. It's not really a great situation if you plan to actually start using the car. And so as a person who's going to use the car, all 3 of these things majorly play into my mind when it comes to why I've specifically chosen to buy cars with miles, which is number 1, they're cheaper and each additional mile is cheaper. Number 2, you don't have to worry about damaging it quite as much because it usually already has a few imperfections. And number 3, mild cars are already used. They will probably be more reliable to keep adding miles. Now, I want to make one other really important point in this video, because I am not just saying go out and buy miled up supercars. I am very, very, very careful when it comes to choosing cars that have miles on them.
a supercar is usually not intended by the manufacturer to be driven very much. And so if you buy a supercar with miles, you have to understand that there starts to be servicing and repair needs that come to those cars. And so when I buy a car, a sports car with miles, I pay an enormous amount of attention to the previous owner and the service history. I put an enormous amount of stock in one of my favorite phrases, which is you're buying the seller. You're not buying the car, you're buying the seller. I bought my Ford GT from the original owner who bought it new, who is fastidious and kept every single receipt. I have a big binder and a book through all of them. I knew the car was going to be good, reliable, and well kept. I bought my Carrera GT also with a full binder of all of its service history and all of its records. The previous couple owners of the Carrera GT, I don't necessarily think they were the greatest stewards of the car. And as a result of that, when I was buying it, I knew I would probably have to do some work to get it up to par. However, I knew that it had great important service items that had already been checked off. Major service items that are endemic to the Carrera GT that had already been done with the car. That was a big factor. And the Countach is probably the best example. I bought the Countach from someone who I would not consider to be a good steward of the car. However, the previous owner had had the car from 1987 until 2020 when he died. And in 2005, which is only 3,000 miles before I bought the car, in 2005, he had done a $60,000 major service, some incredibly expensive service, 50, 60, 70, something in there. Just basically a service that was the same as the value of the car. And to me, and he did it at Evans Automotive, which is a Lamborghini specialist in Columbus, Ohio, that to me suggested this guy knew what he was doing and was putting real money into the car. And even though I had the sketchy owner in between, I had really, really good knowledge of that car's history. If you want to buy a miled up car that has no service history, or that you are buying from someone who is not particularly reputable, you got to start discounting for that, because you have to assume that that car has serious needs. And so buying a mild car is not just like a hack to get a cheaper Ford GT. It's only a hack to get a cheaper Ford GT if you buy a mild car that has been well kept. And as a result of that, you may actually pay a little bit of a premium over a car, just a generally mild car. I paid too much for my Ford GT when I bought it. I think I was about 10 or 15,000 high. But I did that because I knew the previous owner had done such a great job of taking care of the car. You buy a car with the same miles, with a bad Carfax, without service history, that adds some questions to the whole experience, and it makes you wonder, okay, it's not just a factor of buying a mild up car. It's buying one with a history that you could trust, where you know important things have been done. And this is threading the needle. It is much easier to find a low mileage car with very, very little wear, or a high mileage car that's had some incidents. Finding a mild car that has not been damaged, not been messed up, and has major service things done is a hard thing to do. And so I feel very lucky that I have found these three cars, that I can add guilt-free miles, and that I can do it reliably because previous owners have took care of the car well. The Carrera GT had an owner here in San Diego who did a great job of owning the car. And same with the guy he sold it to. There was real important servicing done at that point, and having that paperwork, having that knowledge makes me feel better about buying a mild car. And as a guy who's driving these cars and enjoying them, I have no regrets. There are a lot of collectors, enthusiasts watching this video who are like, yeah, of course you buy a car with miles, you can drive it and use it. But there are just as many guys in the world where these cars play who are sitting here saying, I can't believe that you would use these cars. Like, these are investments. Like, the Ford GT is on the pace of the S&P over the last couple of years. You know, the Carrera GT absolutely beat out the stock market since 2009, going from 250,000 to 2 million. Countach is on a run. Like, there are people who are sitting here saying, why would you do this? It's crazy. And I have to say, I have other things I invest in that are boring. I'm a big stock market index fund guy. My money sits there, it does nothing. It increases, but it's not fun. I can't do anything with it. And so that's already my investment. I have property. That's an investment that, you know, you can use, but it's not like fun necessarily. The cars I don't view as an investment. And I sometimes feel a little bit bad for the guys who do. I will encounter people who are worth 9 figures who buy cars for investment purposes because they can't get their mind out of the mindset that everything they have needs to make money. Like their house, their commercial properties, their stocks, their private equity equity portfolio. It all has to make money, and that includes their cars. And to me, that's not how I view it. I have a lot of stuff that makes money. I'm happy about all those investments. The cars are a wonderful store of value. I have not lost money in the cars. The Ford GT has given me a significant increase. I think the Carrera GT is on the rise. I don't care about that. If the cars simply stayed flat, I would be perfectly happy with the value of the cars. I'm happy with them being just a store of money rather than something that needs to rise, because I feel like enough of my net worth is tied up in boring investments that aren't fun. There should be some portion of the money that goes to enjoyable, fun experiences, and for a car enthusiast, that means cars. So, would I buy a low mileage car? There are two important reasons why I would buy a low mileage car. Number one is, and this is something I've considered, buying a low mileage car because you want to go back to new and have the experience of what the car would have been like from new, and then driving it from there and not even caring about losing the value. I have actually off and on considered doing that with the Ford GT. This one's got 45,000 miles. We've replaced some stuff's worn, etc. I would love to know what it was like to feel like a brand new one. And there are so many brand new ones out there that don't really have a significant premium over my car that I would be kind of curious to have that experience. And so that's one way to do it. You'd have to do some real servicing on a 0-mile car to get it ready to start using regularly, but I think that would be one fun reason to do it. The other reason that I would consider buying a 0-mileage car is if I was planning to collect. If I really thought that car had a future, had a value rise, increase situation in the future, in that situation, I would consider doing it. I just don't see myself doing that. I just built myself a brand new garage that fits 4 cars. That was intentional. I could have fit 6 cars in the space that I had. Chose 4 in large part because I just didn't want to give myself the space to just keep adding and adding like some people that I know. I wanted to just sort of limit myself to what I knew I loved. And I just don't see myself as a guy who's just going to collect, buy a car, let it sit, bring your friends into your garage and point at it. It's just not my thing. And so that situation, I would buy a 0-mile car, but I don't really see it happening. So until then, I'm not really buying cars right now. I'm very happy with the 3 that I have. But inevitably, when the next opportunity comes up to buy something, when I'm interested, I will once again look for a mild car. Not crazy high miles, not something that's damaged or used up, but also not something that's 0-mile pristine. Just something that's sort of in the middle, but clearly had a loving owner with good service records. That is my sweet spot. And I will drive it, and I will enjoy it, and I will have no guilt, because it already has miles. That's the way I do it, and that's why. There you go.